Welcome to Linlithgow, a picturesque town in West Lothian, Scotland, lying between Edinburgh and Falkirk. Its setting is unforgettable. A tranquil loch, a brilliant wee high street full of gorgeous independent shops and pubs, all overlooked by the crumbling yet majestic walls of Linlithgow Palace. The name Linlithgow comes from ancient Celtic roots, usually translated as the loch in the damp hollow. It's an apt description. The town nestles around the water, and from the palace towers the loch seems to stretch out like a mirror reflecting centuries of history. Today, Linlithgow is best known as the birthplace of Mary, Queen of Scots, but its story is far richer, one of royal ambition, artistry, war, ruin, and surprising reinvention. Let's dive into the history of this town and its famous palace and explore how Linlithgow has remained a jewel in Scotland's crown for centuries. Linlithgow's importance comes from both geography and politics. Situated on the route between Edinburgh Castle and Stirling Castle, two of Scotland's most important strongholds, Linlithgow was a perfect halfway point for monarchs and nobles travelling between the two. The town grew around a royal manor from at least the 12th century under King David I, who founded many Scottish boroughs. By 1388, Linlithgow was formally recognised as a royal borough, meaning it had privileges for trade and local government. Its long, broad high street still reflects that heritage, once lined with merchant houses, the toll booth and bustling markets. At the centre of town outside the borough halls stands the Cross Well. It is an octagonal crown. It is ornately carved with the figures around it connected to the town itself, and at the top is a unicorn. Interestingly, there has been a well on the site since at least the 16th century, but this current one was built in 1807 by Robert Gray, a one-armed Edinburgh stonemason. He made a complete replica of the one that was here in 1628, but destroyed by Oliver Cromwell's army, but was rebuilt as best it could by King Charles II in 1660. Incredible looking structure, and now you know a little of its history, let's move on and discover more about Linlithgow. Walking along the high street gives you the sense of a small but wealthy town, tied closely to royal power but sustained by local trade and community. The crown jewel is undoubtedly Linlithgow Palace. Though the site held a royal residence as early as the 12th century, the palace, as we know it, took shape after 1424, when a devastating fire destroyed much of the town. King James I ordered the construction of a new stone palace and St Michael's Church, turning Linlithgow into a showcase of Scottish royal ambition. Over the following centuries, successive Stuart monarchs added to the palace. James III and James IV expanded the ranges, adding lodgings and ceremonial halls. But it was James V who left perhaps the most striking legacy. Born himself in Linlithgow Palace in 1512, James V later rebuilt parts of the palace with the help of his master of works, Sir James Hamilton of Finnart. Together, they brought Renaissance influences into the architecture, unifying facades and adding some of the palace's most iconic features, the great courtyard fountain, for example. The fountain, completed around 1538, is carved with angels, mythical beasts, royal symbols, and heraldic emblems. On feast days, it was said to flow with wine instead of water, a theatrical reminder of the monarchy's wealth and power. And it was in this palace, in the Queen's apartment overlooking the loch, that one of the most famous events in Scottish history occurred: the birth of Mary, Queen of Scots, on the 8th December 1542. Her father, James V, died 6 days later, leaving Mary as queen while still an infant. That fragile moment in Linlithgow marked the beginning of one of the most dramatic lives in European history, a story of rival thrones, political marriages, imprisonment, and eventual execution. Pretty much like a season of Game of Thrones, with just as many twists and turns. And now for a musical interlude. Let's resume, shall we? Mary's birth year also sparked decades of conflict, as Henry VIII of England tried to force a marriage between her and his son Edward. The period became known as the Rough Wooing, marked by raids, sieges, and battles, such as Pinkie in 1547. The peaceful waters of Linlithgow Loch stood in sharp contrast to the turmoil her birth unleashed.
That is the impression of the construction underway around 1620. Master mason William Wallace was commissioned to build the new work. I mean, it's nearly like it was back in the 1620s, I suppose, with the construction on the front. Oh no, dear.
After Mary's time, the palace remained in royal use for a while, but its fortunes changed after 1603, when James VI of Scotland became James I of England and moved his court down to London. Linlithgow fell into neglect. The North Range collapsed in 1607. Cromwell's forces damaged the chapel and statues in the mid-17th century, and by the 18th century fire and abandonment left the palace roofless. Today, the palace is a managed ruin under Historic Environment Scotland. Even as an empty shell, it remains one of Scotland's greatest architectural treasures, and a living reminder of the splendour of the Stuart court. Beside the palace stands St Michael's Parish Church, Linlithgow's other great landmark, dating back to the 12th century and rebuilt in the 15th century after that fire. It's long been the spiritual heart of the town. Mary Queen of Scots was baptised there, and generations of townspeople have marked life's milestones under that roof. The church is dedicated to the Archangel Michael, often shown triumphing over the dragon, seen here in the statue further along the road, a fitting symbol of protection. Today, its distinctive crown-shaped spire of aluminium, added in the 1960s, makes it instantly recognisable on the skyline. But Linlithgow has lesser-known stories. In the 19th century, a local pharmacist named David Waldie provided James Young Simpson with a sample of chloroform, which would go on to revolutionise surgery and childbirth as an anaesthetic. A remarkable global contribution from this quiet town. And Linlithgow has continued to surprise even in recent years. In December 2012, the ruins of Linlithgow Palace became centre stage for high fashion when Chanel, that's right, Chanel brought its Materials d'Art collection. The show, designed by the late creative director Karl Lagerfeld, transformed the Renaissance courtyard into a catwalk, merging centuries-old stonework and contemporary couture. It's a striking reminder that Linlithgow continues to inspire artistry in new forms. So, what makes Linlithgow special? It's a place where Scotland's national history and local community intertwine. A royal borough that shaped trade and politics. A palace that witnessed royal births and international drama. A church that has anchored its people for centuries. And a town that continues to adapt, from medieval markets to modern fashion runways. Linlithgow is more than a ruin or a pretty lochside town. It's a living chronicle of Scotland's story. As you walk its high street, explore St Michael, go round the ruins of the castle itself, you're retracing the footsteps of kings, queens, merchants, soldiers, townsfolk, who together made Linlithgow what it is today. Thanks again for joining me on this wee journey through Linlithgow, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like, share and subscribe button. Until next adventure, thanks for watching, cheerio, bye bye.